Welcome to the Alchemy of Ascension Season 4, Activation of Awareness, Well-Being, Intimacy, and Self-Mastery. I'm your host, Washayla Sananda, and it's my pleasure today to introduce you to Aaron Abke. Welcome, Aaron.
Thank you, Shayla. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm so happy to have you. And hopefully I don't have background noise because the yard people just showed up. Timing.
Sounds good on my end.
Okay, good. So before we really jump in, I would love to just invite you and everyone else to join me in a moment of getting present and intention setting. So let's just begin by closing our eyes and tuning in and deepening the breath into the belly, bringing your awareness of being into the center of your heart, getting in touch with the light inside your heart. And now expand that light from your heart all the way above you to the central sun, high above, getting in touch with the heart light of the central sun and inviting that energy down into the top of your head, through your spine to the base of the spine, all the way down now, extending into the center of the earth and the heart of the Mother Gaia. And then bringing the heart energy of the earth up into the base of your spine, to the top of your head, and then joining this divine alignment of light in your heart center, expanding it out in golden light around your body, and just feeling the alignment of intention. And my intention for this conversation is that each person tuning in receives the information that is for your highest good, for your highest expansion, and that in whatever way you receive it, it is the perfect information for you at this time. And then bring your awareness back and open your eyes. Thank you for tuning in with me. And now, before we jump in with this conversation, I will share a little bit about who Aaron is and your background. I do have yard people out there, sorry. Aaron Abke was born and raised as a pastor's son in the Silicon Valley of California. He desired to work in church ministry like his father and did that at age 23. But after a year of working as a full-time worship pastor, he felt called to leave his religion and pursue a deeper and more authentic spirituality. At 27, Aaron had a dramatic spiritual awakening, which led him to dedicate his life to seeking how to return to that state of self-realization permanently. Aaron's passion is teaching unity consciousness and spiritual awakening, and he does that via YouTube, social media, masterclasses, and workshops, primarily through the teachings of A Course in Miracles and the Law of One. And I have to say, I'm so excited. You are the first Law of One teacher that I've had on the show. And I'm excited to dig into this conversation today. So welcome. And let's just, if you don't mind, I'd love to hear a little bit more about this dramatic spiritual awakening that changed your whole life. Would you share about that?
Sure. Yeah. The best and easiest way for me to maybe simplify what the experience was like for me was, as you said in the introduction, I was in a very tumultuous period in my life, very depressed, and seemingly had everything going for me on the outside. But as it often does, those things were actually catalyzing my depression even more. And yeah, just through intense seeking and desire for answers to why I was in such a horrible state of consciousness, had an experience that really kind of blew the doors off of my mind and left me in a sort of samadhi state for 2 weeks of unbroken realization of oneness, you could say, and just falling so in love with reality and its beauty and perfection. And after coming out of that experience, many people have experiences like that of cosmic consciousness. And the typical narrative is, oh man, it was such a great experience. It was indescribable. And then I lost it. And then it just becomes a story. And it had sort of, because it was what I was longing for so many years, to finally taste it and have it just pierce me the way it did. It was sort of like visiting a faraway land and meeting some unbelievable lover who just captures your attention, and every thought is about them. And then you're ripped away and you have to go back home. And every thought you think is about that person, your beloved, and you just long to return to them. And it was like, I made that commitment to myself. Like, I will not live for anything else ever again. Like, this is my one calling and purpose in life. Now that I've tasted freedom, and I know that liberation is absolutely possible and available for us. Like, what else is there worth living for? And so because I glimpsed it, it was sort of like I had a bit of an advantage in the sense that I could remember what it was like, recall what my state of consciousness was like, and sort of back engineer it of like, how was I in that state? What was I lacking in that state? I was lacking attachment to the body. I was lacking identification with the mind. And just through that, my own process of contemplation and spiritual practice and things like that, I was able to slowly, and have still been on this path of just slowly reintegrating that. And through that maybe reintegration process over the last 5 or so years, just led me to start teaching about it from my own experience of it. And that's kind of left me where I am today.
Wow, thank you for breaking that down. And I really love that you figured out how to sort of reverse engineer the experience and integrate it. And I think that's such a crucial part is, yeah, and I've also had an expansion experience, probably akin to what you experienced, where I was in and out of it for about a 2-week period. And it definitely changed the way I view reality.
Yeah.
And then there's this like, how does this fit? How does this fit into my life and who I'm being? So it is so helpful to have ways and practices and ways to bring the worlds together, because this 3D body and life is very different than what can be experienced in a spiritual expansion like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you for sharing that. And then, so at what point were you led to the law of one? How did that come into your world?
So the law of one came in over a period of time after that experience happened, of just seeking for whatever outlets I could find that could give me answers to the questions I was asking. And so A Course in Miracles came first initially, and the law of one had been on my radar for a while, and I just had never cracked it open until, one day my curiosity was just piqued, and I thought, there must be something in this text for me. Let me just check it out. And so I listened to it on an audio version on YouTube, and I was just so blown away, not just by the material in the text, but how clearly it was a channeled work from a true extra dimensional being. It was just the profundity of it struck me. And I thought to myself, man, how is this text not just everywhere in the spiritual community? This is the most profound thing I've ever come across in my life. And so I sort of thought, well, I guess why not me, right? Like, I'll just start making some videos on it. And it was clear to me how dense the text is intellectually speaking, because Ra, being a social memory complex of 6th density, orders of magnitude higher on the consciousness spectrum than we are currently in these bodies, they are very intentional in their use of human language, because at their level, they don't use language. They have this ability to just impress feelings and intuitions and ideas immediately through consciousness. We call it telepathy. So, vastly superior medium for communication than language. So they have to sort of use these clumsy, archaic symbols called words to express these truths. So in doing that, they want to use the clearest, most accurate words possible available in the human language, which means that they typically use a lot of very big, dense words that many of which you'll read and you've never even heard of the word before. Like in almost every session, there's a new word you've never heard of. And you're like, man, their vocabulary. So it takes a lot of unpacking. And so I thought, okay, maybe the best place to start would be like Law of One for Dummies type of content. Like here's the basic premises, teachings, foundations of this text, the 7 densities of consciousness, the logos, the harvest, the wanderer, and so forth. And to my surprise, I really didn't think people would resonate nearly as much as they did with it. But yeah, everyone who comes across the Law of One seems to have this uncanny response to it of like, wow, it's like I always knew this. It's like I'm remembering these ideas I've always known somewhere deep in my being. And I think that there's a real reason for that, because if truth exists, then it's eternal and it's always been there. And so in that case, we don't actually learn the truth. We just remember the truth. And so the Law of One is a extraordinarily powerful way to allow you to remember the truths of the universe that have always existed within you, and just reminding you of just what an infinite, incredible being that you truly are.
Beautiful. Oh, I love how you shared that. There's so many nuggets in there that I want to go back to. So my guess is that the Alchemy of Ascension audience has a range of viewers, from those who have never even heard of the Law of One to those who are very adept and know all about it and have read it and been practicing along those lines. So, and I think there's space for us to speak into all of those areas. But one thing that I want to begin with, and I also love that you listened first on YouTube. That's how I first encountered the information as well. And this was only a couple years ago for me. I had been sharing some channeling that I do on my own YouTube channel and with my audience email. And they started telling me the feedback that you sound like Ra when you channel in the Law of One. And I'm like, well, I'm not familiar with that. Maybe I should find out what that is.
Wow.
And so I did first listen to all of it on YouTube, and it was like remembering. It was like, yeah, this seems familiar and yet very unusual in the way that it's shared. And so I wanted to dig in a little bit on, you called Ra the social memory complex. And I know like Abraham Hicks is also, I believe, a social memory complex. Can you explain the meaning of that?
Right. Yeah. There's different words for this. Group soul is one you might be familiar with if you haven't heard of social memory. But the Law of One describes social memory as a possibility that becomes available at a certain development of consciousness. And we might imagine, just creatively thinking about it, if the way that the spectrum of consciousness moves is that as we evolve, so I used the word density a minute ago, the 7 densities of consciousness is a model the Law of One lays out. This is sort of the blueprint the soul follows on our evolutionary journey. And the density represents the, you could say, the rate of vibration of light at certain levels of consciousness. So you can imagine the faster a photon vibrates, the more light is contained within that space, which means the more light there is, the more information there is, or the more ability to express consciousness there is. So at a very high level of consciousness, the ability to exchange thought is available. Now, we can exchange emotions already. We can telepathically give each other emotions. If I am in an emotional state, a very charged state, you will feel the impact of that emotion, whether it's positive or negative. So just imagine what that experience is like, but make it as thought. So not that you hear the audible sound of my voice in your brain, but there is a deep impression of the thought I'm thinking. And this actually happens a lot more than we realize. Picking up on thoughts. And if we could be aware of just how much that's actually going on, you're just walking through the mall and just certain thoughts are striking you. if you could sort of see it from an astral point of view, a lot of those thoughts you're having might actually be telepathically pinging off people around you, and you're sort of picking them up, right? So if that happens in the evolution of consciousness, at some point when you and I can just look at each other and just have a conversation in our minds, well, then what's to stop us from sharing our whole spectrum of memory together? I could just show you my life. You could experience Aaron's life, everything that's happened to me, all my thoughts and feelings. And in that instance, essentially you have become Aaron, right? We are one being now. So if that happens, which it does happen, then social memory is this phenomenon where more and more souls begin joining their memories together. Because just logically speaking, right, if that ability does happen, then white people would definitely do that, right? Souls would want to share their memories together because then we can share ideas, ways of thinking, all these new modalities open up. And, the evolution of technology and everything else would just so rapidly increase that the benefits are innumerable. So this is what apparently happens on every planet that evolves into self-awareness, is that the planet itself, almost like Mother Earth, becomes an entity in and of herself, which is the entire shared consciousness of every person on the planet into one mind, or almost like library. So it doesn't mean that we all become one physical entity. There might still be, billions of us walking around on different locations. But what happens is that I can be in San Francisco, let's say, you can be in New York, and someone asks me about you, and I can literally speak for you as if I'm you, because I have all your memories and the way you think and reason and all of that. So it's as if you're there, but just speaking through my body. So I'm sort of channeling your consciousness, and vice versa. You can do that for me. So although individuality is still there in that each unique expression of source is still happening and living its own journey, but the availability is universal at that point. So as planets or civilizations evolve in consciousness, fourth density is where social memory starts, fifth density, sixth density. This is the position that Ra is coming from. And Ra says we are the civilization of the planet Venus from a few billion years ago. And interestingly enough, our science has just discovered, I believe in September of 2019, NASA released a study that found that Venus was the sort of Goldilocks planet a couple of billion years ago. For their own cycle of a few billion years, they were in the habitable zone. They had life and water and all this stuff, which means they probably had intelligent life that evolved on their planet. And now those beings are pure light beings that pretty much just exist in consciousness and can move through the universe with unfettered tread, so to speak. And so that is the journey or trajectory that humanity is currently on. And the law of one says we've just clicked into the fourth density as of 2012. The planet was magnetized to a fourth density vibration. So we're all going to see these abilities in consciousness continue to develop over the next few hundred years until eventually telepathy will be sort of the normal mode of operation or communication on our planet.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, absolutely. I love that. And, I think as we expand, and I'm a teacher of ascension, which is really raising your frequency. It's not about leaving the planet, but
right.
Ultimately that's what we do, right? But expanding and being in the body as you're ascending the frequency of your mind, body, spirit complex, right?
Yeah.
So it's as we do that, we become naturally more and more connected to everybody who's on our frequency, like a radio dial, right? We feel and we experience, and then maybe of the others too, depending on how empathic we are. We start feeling the earth, we feel the animals, the plants, and as we get more sensitive, it can be uncomfortable. But then it's remembering that this is, it's fascinating to me that this is a process that seems to have been going on, we don't know, maybe infinitely, whatever we can conceptualize. Billions of years ago, Ra was on Venus, and now here sharing to us. That's kind of mind-blowing.
Yeah.
So let's dig into, well, also I wanted to mention about the Egyptian relationship. Can you speak
Mhm.
of the Egyptian relationship with Ra?
Yeah, so Ra, they ask Ra about this almost right off the bat after Ra introduces themselves. I am Ra. They say, "Oh, are you the Ra from Egypt?" And they say, "Yes, we came to the Egyptians, I think about 11,000 years ago. I believe they came on two different occasions, but the gist of it is the Egyptians at that point were a pantheistic culture, and they worship the sun as a god, the moon as a goddess, and all these things. And that is actually very accurate to the way the universe works. That's another concept called the logos, which is the idea that the sun is actually a intelligence that sets up the whole solar system with its own rule sets, and the archetypal mind, the zodiac, and all these things. So in a sense, it's true that the sun sort of is our god in that way. And so the Egyptians believed kind of all this stuff intuitively, that all is the one being. So Ra didn't see it as an infringement of their free will to walk among them and teach them the law of one, which is why they never would come to like a monotheistic culture like the Middle East or something, because that's totally opposite of what they believe their conception of God is. And so what they wanted to do for Egypt was that at that time, we know historically as well that the average lifespan of an Egyptian was like 30 years old. And in third density, although many people might be unfamiliar with what that means, third density, which is what we're essentially still in, is the only density of consciousness that has what is called the veil of forgetting. Because this density of third density, where we become self-aware, I know I exist as a separate entity from the environment. When that happens, this layer of consciousness is about choosing between the two polarities. Do I want to be a positively polarized being and evolve on that path, or a negatively polarized being and evolve on that path? And the source wants that choice to be totally authentic and uninfringed. So because of that, it puts a sort of veil over third density minds to where we can't remember where we came from, why we're here, who we are. We don't remember our past lives. We don't understand the nature of the universe. We're just here in this life, wrestling with the daily catalysts of positive and negative, and choosing love or choosing separation. And neither one's right or wrong. Both are equally valid choices, but they have very different consequences, of course. So third density takes a lot of many lifetimes to wrestle with these catalysts and make these choices until the soul will truly gravitate towards love and make that selection of, I want to be a positively polarized being and be one with the universe. So Egypt at that time was only living about 30 years of lifespan, which Ra says was sort of a perpetual spiritual childhood. Because as we know, when you're 30 years old, like typically, even if then, if you're lucky, you're just coming into spiritual truths and understanding and all of this. And many people don't even get there till they're in their 50s or 60s. And even more people never do. So 30 years is nowhere near a long enough time in this experience to like really understand the game you're playing. So Ra was seeing this culture that had, because of all the different diseases and viruses going around in ancient Egypt, they just didn't live very long. And they went, man, these poor people are stuck in this infancy perpetually and just reincarnating over and over without being able to learn much. So they came to show the Egyptians how to heal your body using crystals, using pyramids, which they built themselves. And they go into all the details of how the pyramids were used with crystals. They also use them for self-realization and all these things. And at some point, the teachings that they were giving the Egyptians of the law of one were being distorted and used for power, and sort of being restricted from the lower class people and only used for the elites and stuff, which is very much counter to the law of one. And so they said, okay, this is now, we're doing more harm than good, so we're going to leave this civilization now. And so that's kind of their experience of coming to Egypt. And when they came to Egypt, the Egyptians perceived them to be a manifestation of Ra, the sun god. So the Egyptians named them Ra. And so, Ra, being a very benevolent being, was happy to accept whatever name they gave of their own free will. So they still identify themselves to our planet as sort of the last thing that our planet named them, which was Ra. But what they actually are is basically the planet Venus.
Fascinating. Yeah. And so before we move on, I really want to dive in with the sun. And I personally am a sun gazer. What I've learned from sun gazing, I didn't set out to think of the sun as a god or anything like that. It's just I learned about sun gazing many years ago, did it for a while, and then stopped. And then a while back, maybe 2 years ago, learned again, remembered, and started practicing again. And now what I found in the interim, my sun gazing changed a lot. As I'm gazing at the sun now, there is this opportunity to receive that light into the body and then connect from the sun of our solar system to central sun, which you might have noticed I brought central sun in the intention at the very beginning, which I find to be almost like the hub of consciousness informing our solar system and many others.
Right.
So like that connected consciousness in the center of everything that we can actually receive. And so since I've been doing this sun gazing regularly, daily for the last at least a year, I find that I receive really powerful information in channeled information and just awarenesses that is all light. It's the being of light. It's light in information.
Yeah.
And I'm bringing this up not to tell anyone, and I mention this a lot, don't just go start staring at the sun. Make sure you're properly trained if you want to take this on. I do encourage it, but just get training first. And there's some fear that we have in our culture around the sun, which we must not go into sun gazing with fear, because that can have
Right.
negative consequences.
Never good.
But it's fascinating to me that I feel like this is all the information that Ra's bringing in is available through the portal of the sun to the central sun. And the power of that is just like that we have that every day right here above us. We just walk outside. I mean, some people are in cloudy places and dark places, I get it, but for at least a portion of the year or portion of the days of the year, everyone has access to that, and we can expand in that way. And so, I'd love your take on sun gazing, if that's something you've done. And then from there, I want to step into how did we start getting this information on the planet from Ra at this time?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's what they ask Ra as well, like why us, sort of. And Ra's answer is that we wanted to, because they perceived that they were sort of responsible for some distortions of the law of one that happened. They said, it was a bit naive of us to think that this culture was really ready for this expansive teaching. Even though they conceptually believed this stuff, there's a difference between embodying truth and just thinking of it or knowing of it. So they said, we wanted to wait until we found a group that was very harmonious together and very pure and sincere in their intentions for why they want to channel. And so the three members of the group, Dawn Elkins, Carla Ruckart, and Jim McCarty, that did these channeling sessions, they were actually UFO researchers for, I want to say, a little over a decade, that they were doing dedicated channeling sessions with about 12 people, because they were, in researching the UFO phenomenon, they started to realize, I don't think the best way to understand these entities that are appearing in our skies is by trying to understand their science and their technology, but really their philosophy and spirituality. And so they sort of intuitively understood, like, we can communicate with these beings in thought if we learn how to channel, and maybe that's the best route to go. So they started learning how to channel, and they had some contacts here and there for about a decade, but it wasn't until Carla, who was a very gifted channeler, joining their group, because her boyfriend at the time was in the group, and she would kind of sit in on these sessions, and she got really interested and was like, I want to learn how to do this. And then within, I think, a few months of her learning, like, boom, they started getting the raw contact, and she was just sort of divinely gifted with this ability. And so when they contacted Ra, they knew this is a real genuine contact here. So they started doing dedicated channeling sessions. And Ra said, we've been surveying your planet for many thousands of years, waiting for an opportunity where we could register the consciousness of the group as being pure enough to channel the law of one through, without it turning into a cult or a religion or being distorted in these ways. And to their credit, L&L Research, this group of the three people who contacted Ra, have been unbelievably pure in their intentions and giving this material out for free to the world. They do make books you can buy, but you can access it all online. And that's very congruent with the law of one philosophy, which is that this is not a religion or a cult. This is the truth of everyone's being. We're all this, and everyone is equally, has equal rights to this information. So it should never be an exclusive type of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, it's like the remembering in a way. When you hear it, it's like, yeah, this all makes sense.
Yeah.
And we do want to turn things into religions when, that's what happens in our culture. Yeah. I can say myself, when I had my very powerful spiritual experience, a light being came to me. She identified as Christus. She wasn't looking to be worshiped or anything like that. She was the pure feminine essence of the Christ consciousness. And it's light being, and it was just like this most blissful experience I've ever had with a being present. It was just like beyond words almost. I wrote about it in my book, but after that experience, my human mind went to, this could be a religion, people need to know. And it was really it was just out of the desire to share, like, how can everybody know that this exists? But that's, I'm like, wait, no, not religion.
Right.
It's about the essence of being, but that purity, that's just kind of where the human mind goes. So to keep it pure, to have a pure heart and mind, a high heart and mind, that is what opens the channel to receive these very high, this high information or of high consciousness and of high purity. So this group came together and was able to open that channel and receive this information out of the purity of their desire and curiosity, and just desire to know.
And all world religions point to these truths, to your point. Like, I think that's why we so easily turn all truth into religions, because the ego wants to package it and claim it and, have a name for it and things like that. And that's just kind of where we're at evolutionarily. But the truth that you received from this being is the truth at the core of all religions. And if you just get rid of all the dogma around it, you see this one truth in every world religion.
Yeah. And it really just goes back to being. I can say, in the presence of that essence, that being, that light being, there was nothing to do but experience being. And then everything, I had music, and it was synesthesia, and I was feeling and experiencing and understanding and seeing everything. There was no, the senses were no longer separate. Everything was included, and it was such a expansive experience. But then again, integrating that in a way that made sense in this body, in this density, was the challenge after that.
Because you can't.
Yeah. So these three really did a great job of bringing that information through and sharing it with us. And I'd love to hear from you, in your perception, what are the most important teachings of the law of one? If you had to give a nutshell of most important thing to come away with, what is that in your experience?
It's really hard to say, because one of the things the law of one does for people is, reading it is almost like this giant sigh of relief for your being. Like, oh, thank goodness. All is well. Everything is perfect the way it's supposed to happen. There's nothing to fear in the universe. it really gives you this visceral feeling of like all is well because of the way it sort of lays out the game you're playing. And when you don't know the game you're playing, the mind can run wild with all the horrible possibilities of maybe this universe is this dark, horrible place I'm in. And the law of one quickly dispels that by giving you many principles and archetypes of how the universe works that perfectly match your experience of life. And you can sort of connect with your own experience and go, yeah, I see that. That is how my consciousness works. And, darkness does lead to these consequences. Light does lead to these benefits. And so for that reason, I would, if I had to choose just one teaching, it would always be the 7 densities, because of the way it shows you of like, here's the game board you sit on. Here's where you are on the game board, which is why you're having some problems, because that's kind of the way it's supposed to be on this space of the game board. But don't worry, because the other spaces on the game board, it gets better and better from here. So you have nothing to fear and everything to look forward to.
Ooh, I love that. That's a great way to think about it.
Yeah,
It only gets better. So
yeah,
many of us here are in a difficult position on the game board for sure.
Yeah.
And it's easy to get sucked into, the negativity of this experience. It can be very pervasive. And so, and then I also want to bridge into, I know a big part of what you love to share about and teach about is A Course in Miracles. How do you feel that the Course in Miracles and the Law of One relate to each other?
Yeah. To me, the two texts are such perfect dance partners, because the Law of One, again, shows you the game you're playing. So, okay, you're playing Monopoly, right? Here's how Monopoly works. And you're like, okay, that helps a lot. But then A Course in Miracles comes along and shows you how to play Monopoly in such a way that you win it when you play it. Because it's a very complex game with lots of variables and things. And A Course in Miracles comes along. I mean, so basically what the Law of One says to us as a humanity, as a collective, in so few words is, you are at this great transition point. You are coming out of the 3rd density of consciousness, which is the density of essentially of separation, because it's the density of self-awareness. The sort of animal kingdom is 2nd density. So from essentially plants through animals, where there is awareness, but there's not really self-awareness. Like an animal doesn't contemplate its existence and like past lives, and it doesn't have the ability to really feel guilt. Like the lion eats the gazelle without any remorse because it's just pure instincts, right? There's no self doing the actions. It's just being moved by life. Well, in 3rd density, consciousness has vibrated enough to become self-aware and know I am as a concept. So now I am can contemplate past and future, and this idea that, okay, you're in a different body than I'm in, so we must be different beings. So maybe you're an obstacle for me. Maybe you're going to get in my way of survival. Maybe it's to my benefit to control you. And we create war and tribalism and separation and all this stuff. And a lot of good stuff comes from ego as well, technology, and all the other things in our world. But at some point, we create so much strife and struggle and suffering in 3rd density from believing we're separate from each other, that consciousness starts to consider new possibilities, which moves us into the 4th density of unity consciousness. And this is where, just like after consciousness experiences enough of the animal density, 2nd density, it starts to realize I am my own individual being. Same way, after enough time as being a separate individual being, consciousness goes, you know what, maybe we're all in different bodies, yes, but we're all one being, because we all suffer the same, we experience pleasure and pain the same, we want the same things. It's sort of like we're one great consciousness experiencing many forms. And that capacity to understand that and see that is available in 4th density. And so we see that in our world, don't we? We're having this spiritual awakening collectively, where people like you and I are conversating about these ideas and realizing we're in this together. The more we separate each other, the more we're just walking into our own damnation, right? We really need to come together and get over our differences and see that at the core of what we are, we're all one being. We all want the same thing, which is to be happy. And we can make a happy world together. but we can't make it apart. And so that's fourth density, which is again, as of 2012, apparently planet Earth clicked into that vibration, and it's apparently a 30 million year cycle. So we're, at the very, very beginning of it and just starting to grasp these new ideas that are available in consciousness. But this is sort of the place we're at. And A Course in Miracles comes along and says, here's how you access unity consciousness. Realize the Christ in all beings. See everyone as one with you. Serve your brother. Forgive your brother. Forgiveness is the path to enlightenment, because forgiveness annihilates the idea that I'm separate from you and you can somehow attack me or hurt me in some way. When I realize we're all sort of the one dreamer, like I'm you in that body, you're me in this body, then the idea of attack becomes irrelevant because there's just one being, right? And that's where forgiveness becomes available. And so the Law of One doesn't go into that stuff very much. There are some practices given. And then ACIM doesn't really explain the game board like the Law of One does. It just says, here's how to win the game. So I think when you bring the two together, it's just an incredibly powerful partnership.
Oh, I love the way you described that. Yes, because it's not enough to know that the game exists and that we're playing it. If you don't have the rules or how to make progress, then yes. And I did the Course in Miracles. Gosh, it's been 20 years ago when I was introduced to that.
Oh, wow.
It's probably time for a review. But
Sure.
it was certainly a powerful experience for me to go through that process and that class, that training. And also I think I just want to address there's so many things you shared there, but it seems like people are waking up and even people are having spontaneous awakenings faster. I call it like the popcorn effect, people popping out all over the place. They're just like, whoa, I'm awake. What's happening?
Very much so.
And yet there's this integration of, okay, it makes sense. I get on some level that we're all one at the highest level, having all of these different experiences, that we're all of Christ consciousness, but then the practice of it is, it's, like you said, yeah, we forgive and all of this, but they did that to me, but I was hurt by them, but they abused me or whatever that is. What are some actionable ways of being, or even maybe a mindset piece that have been helpful to you or to your students to address that? Because when we are feeling hurt and betrayed and all of those lower feelings of separation, how do we bridge into forgiveness and love and oneness?
Yeah, that is the question. And there's, many ways we can look at this question. But I think one of the first things we need to know is that this transition from, ego consciousness of third density to unity consciousness of fourth density it's going to be challenging. It's like giving birth. Like you are moving into an entirely new mode of perception of reality that is totally in conflict with the default mode network of ego. I'm separate. I'm an individual entity that's occupying a body, and I have to preserve and protect it and enhance it because I just got a short little time here before my annihilation draws nigh. So I got to take what I can get while I can get it. I mean, that's the default mode, isn't it? So to say, oh no, forgive everyone. No one can hurt you. All is one. Only love exists. That's a pretty radical shift, right? So have patience with yourself. First of all, expect the mind to fight you on that and try to revert you back to separation consciousness, because that's what it's designed to do. We've had 100,000 plus years of our human race evolving with an ego to strengthen itself and enhance itself. So at this point, collectively, it has a lot of power over us in consciousness. And the main catalyst for self-realization is just desire. You have to be sick and tired of believing you're just a body who's going to die one day. You're a separate entity from everyone else, and they've hurt you and done all these horrible things to you. I mean, you just have to get to a place where that you've had enough of that experience. You've said, okay, been there, done that. I'm tired of it. I want a different experience. I just want to know what love and unity is. And that will do the work for you, really. But at the stage where we're integrating these new ideas, it will feel like there's really a self in here that's doing the practicing and trying to become love, which of course you don't become love. You are that. You just realize it by getting rid of the false. In that process, the course really meets us at the place where we're at and sort of speaks to us as an ego, as a concession to the belief that you think you're separate. And it sort of talks you out of separation and into unity by explaining to you the benefits of it. And here's what you can look forward to when you see your brother as one with you, when you see your brother as the Christ rather than your abuser or whatever. You will have nothing but perfect peace and happiness. You'll forget what suffering even feels like and all these other things. But if you see your brother as separate from you, you are attacking yourself. You're keeping yourself bound to the dream world and suffering. And so the course just lays out this choice again and again. It makes a very easy distinction. There's truth and illusion, and that's it. There's no middle ground between the two. You're either in the dream world or you're in reality. And you can't have one foot in both worlds, right? So as you begin practicing forgiveness, it's really hard at the beginning because you really believe, I'm definitely this body that person definitely betrayed or abused, and it definitely hurt. But as you want that to not be your experience anymore, you start to get glimpses of what real freedom is like, of not being identified with the body, but knowing I am eternal, infinite consciousness, just sort of watching a 3D movie. And just like when you watch a movie, if you get too engrossed in the movie, you'll start identifying with the main character and you'll freak out when they're in trouble and you'll cry when they lose and all these things. And at some point, when you can learn to watch the movie without identifying, you can still very much enjoy the movie, even more so probably. You can learn the lessons the movie's showing you, but you don't suffer at the hands of the main character anymore because you know it's just an act that consciousness is playing to learn about itself. And what an expansive, liberating state of consciousness to live from. So it takes some practice and some time, and you have to have patience along the journey. But wanting it is the number one ingredient. And if you want it, you will begin applying the teachings of the course. And if you apply the teachings, you start to see very quickly that they work. And that builds conviction in you, which kind of just carries its own momentum at some certain point.
Beautifully shared. Thank you. And I love that have patience with ourselves and forgiveness for ourselves, because it's not that we just suddenly arrive at a new level of consciousness and all of the challenge of being there goes away. It's the opposite. Like we'll still be challenged. We'll still get opportunities regularly to go back, into that old way of being. And then we get to practice and practice. Yes. Okay, well, I know, are giving away a wonderful gift that can help people in this very practice that we're talking about. It is a 4-week masterclass. Would you share with us what that is all about?
Yeah, so I recently launched a 4-week masterclass. I have an 8-week masterclass called Master Your Mind that takes people through a lot of these ideas and teachings in a way that it's not about just delivering information, but about the practices that help you integrate it into your awareness and your actual lived experience. So again, you can have that conviction of these truths, right? And so the masterclass is pretty deep and intensive in the work it offers. And so what I do is I give people a free 4-week masterclass that is set up the same way with weekly video lectures, a practice sheet that gives you kind of like one primary practice for the week, whether it's non-doership or silence meditation or karma yoga. It gives you one practice to focus on, makes the teaching very clear. We give you a phone wallpaper background that has the mantra for the week on it. So you're kind of always seeing the mantra and repeating it to yourself to really just get that truth in you and ingrain it into the system. And then we have a Q&A at the end of the week where people ask their questions about the practice and things like that. And then a guided meditation as well. So it's 4 weeks where each week is a different practice and teaching. And it just gives people a real glimpse of what my 8-week course is like. If they feel like it resonated and helped them, then they can, do a discovery call to learn more about the course. So it's available on my YouTube channel. I know you'll have the link for it, and it's entirely free, no strings attached. You can just take it, extract all the benefits from it, and move on if you want to. Or if you want to take it to the next level, then you can do that as well.
And what's the name of your YouTube channel so everybody can find it?
Yeah. YouTube.com/Aaron Abke.
Mhm.
And the series is called Remember I Am, the 4 yogas. So each week is going over one of the 4 yogas from the Advaita Vedanta tradition.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your generosity and for sharing that with everyone. And I'll be sure to put the link in the show notes. And everybody get that 4-week masterclass and get supported on your journey. Aaron, this has been such a pleasure. I really so appreciate you showing up and sharing from your heart and unpacking these really powerful concepts in the Law of One and also A Course in Miracles. So just thank you for your generosity and who you're being. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much. It's a blessing to be with you and to talk with you. And I've really enjoyed it. And so look forward to doing it again.
Absolutely. I would love to do it again. And to everyone watching, thank you so much for showing up. Thank you for being on this path with us. Reply to the email if you got an email, or put a comment in the YouTube box if you're on YouTube watching. I appreciate you all, and namaste.
Namaste.